I'm Chris from Play Comics, a show where we look at video games based on comic properties and how well they stick to that comic book source material. A part of the GonnaGeek Network, just like the show you're checking out now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and the opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other wonderfully geeky shows at GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
This is the official GonnaGeek.com show. Here we run down the latest news and happenings in the world of geek. These are your hosts for the show, Steven, Chris, and SP.
Welcome to episode 412 of the official GonnaGeek Show. This is your May 2024 edition. I am Steven, and I am pleased to say Chris Farrell is here.
Happy belated Star Wars Day, everyone.
We could go with Revenge of the Sixth, like some people incorrectly do, but we also have SP here.
Yes, I was going to mention that. Revenge of the Sith. By the way, as we're recording, astronauts are driving to the Pad Launch Complex 41 to be on the first crewed mission of Starliner, which will launch in precisely 3 hours.
Crewed, do they have potty mouths?
I'm pretty sure they have diapers on, so maybe.
We are recording this today on the 6th of May, 2024. I think I said that already, but I do want to say that, actually, I want to ask the question. What do we think? Is it Revenge of the 5th or Revenge of the 6th? Which is it?
Revenge of the Sith. Doesn't matter.
It does, because it's May the 4th be with you, and it is most definitely not Revenge of the Sith. It is definitely Revenge of the 5th or Revenge of the 6th. One of the two.
It's the 5th. Because what do we call that day in between if we make it the 6th?
A lackluster movie day.
We're talking about Attack of the Clones now?
Yeah, that's not that great of a film. No?
I didn't have anything nice to say, so I'm not going to say anything. Don't make me say something about Star Wars movies I don't like.
Yeah, you got to be careful. You say something about Star Wars movies on the internet anymore, and then you just get your mentions full of stupid comments.
It's crazy. Star Wars. There's good Star Wars stories out there, and there's ones that don't speak to me. And I'm not going to say which ones those are.
There's good Star Wars movies, which are the ones I like, and then there's also the movies that I don't like. And that is 100% what it is. There's no other alternative opinion out there.
That's the Venn diagram right there. You get one or the other.
Oh, well, if you like Star Wars movies, May the 4th be with you, or Revenge of the 5th, or Revenge of the Sith, or Revenge of the 6th, whichever you would like, because here on the GonnaGeek Show, we are people pleasers. We are here to please you. Just to go back here to the whole Star Wars thing in our chat, because we do stream this to GonnaGeek.com/live when we record. We do have Albert in the chat saying best Star Wars movie was Spaceballs.
I mean, there's definitely a lot of Star Wars in Spaceballs.
Yes.
All right, well, let's talk some news here. Let's start off with something about Chris's most hated company ever. He hates their consoles. He hates their movies. In fact, he hates every single property that Sony owns. Isn't that right, Chris?
He refused to buy a PlayStation 5.
That's right, because I won my PlayStation 5 and didn't have to pay a dime for it. But there's a lot of people that were upset with Sony and perhaps may not be as much now. But my question for you as we start this, have you guys heard of the game Helldivers 2 that has kind of taken the internet by storm? It's available on both the PlayStation 5 and PC via Steam.
I have not heard of the term Helldivers. I assume it's some form of swimming pool in hell.
I mean, it's entirely possible. Helldivers 2 is a pretty popular game. It's gotten popular very much so on the PC side of things. And I'm laughing because if you're on video, Steven's now back in hell. And it has been a success for Sony as they have pivoted to selling some of their games digitally for PC. So this game has been available on Steam for Windows PCs. So let me give a little bit of background right now. The game's been out about a month and a half right now. And on May 3rd, Sony announced in a tweet and then on their website, due to technical issues at the launch of Helldivers 2, we allowed the linking requirements for Steam accounts to a PlayStation Network account to be temporarily optional. That grace period will now expire. Please see the below post. So what was supposed to happen is on May 6th, the day we're recording this, there was going to be an update that came out for Helldivers 2 that required all PC players to have a Sony PlayStation Network account. Now, some background. The PlayStation Network account is free. You don't have to pay for PlayStation Plus or anything like that, but you do have to create the account and then link it with your Steam account. This is problematic. Why is that the case? Well, it's been for sale on Steam. Steam is available in a lot more regions than where PlayStation Network is available. So we have people that bought this game at launch nearly 2 months ago that may live in regions where PlayStation Network can't be accessed. They don't serve that area. You can't sign up for an account if you live in country X, we'll call it. So these players are going, well, you're making it mandatory I link this. I can't make a PlayStation Network account, so I can't play this game anymore. There's another twist to it. In some countries, there are more stringent requirements for signing up for a PlayStation Network account, even the free one, where you have to provide photo ID to Sony to prove your identity. In my case, I would have to send a copy of my driver's license digitally to them to prove that I am in fact myself. Again, you can see why people might be uncomfortable with that. Why is that the case? Well, we've talked on this show multiple times in various tech blogs. PlayStation Network's been hacked and leaked PII probably, 4 or 5 times at this point in time? If I don't have to make an account, why would I want to do it to have all of this stuff leak out? So, needless to say, fans on the internet were pissed. They were mad. This feels like a change in the requirements for the game. You didn't make us aware of the fact that this was not, in fact, optional full-time. It was only optional during the launch window. So a lot of people felt like Sony had played fast and loose with customer money. So much so that a lot of these players who were impacted in countries where they either couldn't get a PlayStation Network account or the requirements required submitting additional PII to them went to Steam rather and asked for their money back. So for those that aren't aware, there is a money back clause in most Steam purchases. I think if you've played less than 2 hours in a 2-week window, Steam will give you a digital return, effectively meaning you can try out a game and see if it works.
Is that like Bear Claws? Is that what this is?
Yeah, we'll go with that. So some folks have been playing this game since launch, had hundreds of hours into it, and appealed to Steam and said, hey, here's the problem. Here's why I want my money back. And Steam started blanket giving money back to people that returned Helldivers 2. So that's money out of Steam's pocket. That's money that's going to be coming out of Sony's pocket. And that might have been the straw that broke the camel's back. As when we get to, I believe it was May 5th, we've seen, going back in time, there were more than 200,000 reviews of Helldivers 2 that were negative on Steam in the aftermath of this disastrous announcement. And then on Monday, Sony realized, oh, wait, we can't overcome this bad press. We like the money we've made off this game that's been a surprise hit, more so than anyone anticipated, and announced online, Helldivers fans, we've heard your feedback on the Helldivers 2 account linking update. The May 6th update, which would have required Steam and PlayStation Network account linking for new players and for current players beginning on May 30th, will not be moving forward. Now, let's not kid ourselves here. Sony didn't change this just because people got mad online. I think Sony changed it more because Steam started issuing returns, which meant that, oh, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to return this game, that we've been banking on the fact that, hey, this is a real big hit that no one expected, that we're selling on Windows. We're making a big impact on Steam. Steam sales are up. We have great reviews. And it all turned to crap in the span of a couple of days because people review bombed, but more importantly, started then returning the game. So this is a win for fans, but let's not think it's a win for fans because Sony cared that fans were mad. They more cared that fans were getting their money back.
Give me one example where a company hasn't cared for its customer above itself. One example.
Mhm.
I rest my case.
I mean, do you just want me to list some? Never mind. I'm not gonna. I don't want to. I don't bring that fire down on us on this show. I don't want to bring that fire. I can think of a social media company, an electric vehicle company where that'd be the case. Let's just leave it that way.
Oh, interesting. Oh, funny that. SP, you look deep in thought.
I'm running through the list of extensive Fortune 500 companies in my brain. No, 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 no. Yeah. It's all about the dollar. It's all about the company itself. And the only way you can affect the company is by affecting the dollar. Let's take, and I don't want to make a political statement here, but let's take the whole Bud Light thing that happened. Was that last year? And then before that, the Gillette shaving thing that they had the Super Bowl ad that made fun of guys. So like guys are like, no, I'm not going to buy a Gillette razor anymore. So yeah, companies can try to make a statement and they just, it just doesn't work out when there is a mass like review bomb or a mass return or a embargo, or people just don't buy the product anymore because they don't want to support the company. You can affect a company, but only through its pocketbook.
I'll be honest, if Steam had not made exemptions for their return policy, I don't know that this would have been undone as quickly. I think they might have seen their sales drop off vastly on the Windows side of things and seen playtime go down, but I don't know that this decision would have happened anywhere near as quickly. It's more the returns set a precedent of going, oh crap.
Now, did Sony have to accept the Steam returns? Because Steam made an exception to their return policy. Did Sony have to accept that? Or could Sony have forced Steam to take the hit?
I don't know. And it's probably a matter of how these agreements are made between these companies to license things to sell on the Steam marketplace. My assumption is that there's probably provisions in place there so that Steam's not the one holding the bag, but who knows? Steam's been relatively, so far as companies go, they tend to be one of the more relatively better towards consumers.
I do think it is a prime example, though, of how in modern times you got to make a little bit of noise with some of these decisions in order to have consumers' best interests affected, because we see a lot of this stuff happening right now in the world of gaming, in the world of media and whatnot. Companies are very quick to try something new that they think is going to make them more money. It seems now more than ever, they're not thinking about the consumers first in these sort of technologies. And as soon as you get a bunch of people doing something like this, I think it makes a difference. We've reported lots of different cases like this in recent of companies backpedaling because they made an obvious misstep. So, keep it up, people. And maybe in the future, Chris will actually choose to buy a Sony piece of equipment rather than just wait for something to be gifted to him.
I mean, if people want to gift me stuff, I'm going to take it. So give me free things, people.
Fair enough.
Gimme.
All right, well, moving on to the next news point here. I had something that I wanted to discuss on here, and I will offer my sincere apologies ahead of time, because this is something that for this story, I have to do what very few people actually want to do, and it's learn more about Canadian culture and Canadian ways.
I can't believe I'm sitting here through this.
I know. You should really just walk away. That would be my suggestion. And what I'm going to talk about is a retail chain up in Canada called London Drugs. And I say up in Canada, but it's really most just Western-ish Canada, because London Drugs is the name of a retail chain up here that has 78 stores across the provinces of BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. Now, this store is a weird assortment of a retail center, because they have a bunch of various retail offerings, including like small appliances and cosmetics and housewares. They always have this odd seasonal section of a very limited amount of seasonal products that I don't know how it sells. And they even have electronics. Back in the day, I would go to London Drugs and I would walk around. They had a little electronics corner. It's where I would look at various things, try to figure out what I was going to put my hard-earned birthday dollars towards, which Logitech product. Basically, I'd walk around their computer center just for hours on end.
Fair.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. But if the name London Drugs didn't tell you this, they also have a pharmacy. Now, why do I mention all this? Because we're recording this today on Monday, May the 6th. And over a week ago, on Sunday, April 28th, without notice, they suddenly closed their stores and just said they were temporarily closed until further notice. So what do you think that is? You think, well, they must have gone over. A little chain like that, they can't compete with the likes of Walmart. Well, that might be true, but that wasn't actually the reason why. It was because apparently a cybersecurity incident had occurred. Now, that's all they've said. They haven't said specifics, but they did say it was due to a cybersecurity incident, and they closed all of their stores. Now, they claim no customer data was compromised, but did say critical data infrastructure was affected and had to be rebuilt. So what do you think? They probably have some fallbacks, maybe a couple hours, maybe, a Sunday, the day, because, weekend, and maybe not going to pay those extra OT hours. Nope, because they didn't start reopening some stores until May 4th, nearly 1 week after the incident. And as of today, recording this, like we said, on the 6th, they are still gradually reopening stores. Apparently, yesterday, the statement stated that they had 28 of the 79 locations reopened, and they still are slowly working towards getting full functionality, because they said that, as we have communicated over the last few days, our store systems are necessarily complex, as is the need to connect with multiple third-party provider systems, all with different requirements to ensure a smooth and safe reconnection, end quote. And this goes on to that pharmacy perspective, that through all of this, they said they would try to deal with urgent prescriptions and things like that, but they are saying that they cannot deal with brand new prescriptions being sent in. Now, I don't know what it's like down there in America, but up here, when somebody picks a pharmacy, they generally stick with that pharmacy until something happens and then they decide, okay, it's time for me to move on, whether it's them moving or, pharmacists change and they're not happy or whatever it is. Usually you pick pharmacy, you stick with it because they know all your medications, and generally that's how it works up in my parts. And a little anecdotal information there. Every now and then, on a local Facebook group, someone will say, well, I need a new pharmacy. Where should I go? And there's always a couple of people in there that say, hey, I use London Drugs. So it's not like, it's 3 customers. There's a decent amount of people that do use it. It is, their name is London Drugs, for crap's sake. And they still can't handle brand new prescriptions. So this kind of tells you the extent of whatever happened to this cybersecurity incident, what systems were affected. And I just wanted to bring it up because, yes, it is a little more niche example, but it's also not 3 stores either. It's a chain of 79 locations across multiple provinces. Don't we think it's time that stores and retail centers should be required, especially handling things like, medical prescriptions, to have better safeguards or better retention plans? Like, I don't know. I found this whole incident very interesting because I've heard of cybersecurity incidents happen at different grocery stores, and I know there's one with Home Depot. I don't remember things being closed outright like this in these past things. I remembered systems being throttled, or, vendors being outright unable to be paid because of this problem for an indefinite period, but not just outright closed like this was. And I thought it was an interesting example to bring up. And maybe it's just because the igloo melted in the server farm that their main infrastructure's in. It could very well be that.
Global warming's a thing.
So what do you guys think about cybersecurity incidents like this? Do you think we just have scratched the surface on this? We're going to see a lot more, or do you think companies are going to start waking up?
I mean, they should have woken up about it before now, especially companies that hold access to my medical data.
Mm-hmm.
That would be concerning to me. The fact that they're claiming none of my information was compromised, I guess, is good news, but can you trust it? Do they actually know with the extent of what's going on? And more problematic to me would be if I need a new prescription, I can't file it with them right now, it sounds like, with any reasonable level of confidence. So that might mean that I need to start looking at one of the other myriad places to go and get prescriptions from. So that's probably bad for the company's bottom line. And I guess my biggest takeaway of this is I really hope the employees aren't getting screwed by this in the end. Or I wonder if they're getting paid while they're out or not, or if they're just on unpaid time off and now having to try to figure out, well, what the hell do I do now to take care of my family?
Yeah, I have the same question about information. I really wonder how much they actually know. It seems often people have said, no, nothing was compromised. And then a little bit later, oh, my bad, it was.
Yeah, I guess if they wanted to retain me as a customer, I need to see some kind of plan as to what we're going to do to prevent this from happening in the future, what lessons were learned, and I don't need them to get into the explicit detail of, hey, here's the lessons we learned so the hackers can exploit it. But I need to feel relatively confident that if I give London Drugs my sensitive medical information, I mean, it's not really as sensitive, I take 2 prescriptions, but regardless, if I'm giving them medical PII, that I need to ensure that it's protected. And that's important to me.
Well, Chris, that Viagra is really expensive.
Not really. You just buy it in Mexico.
Well, Chris, good news for you is that London Drugs hasn't even reached the entire national Canadian stage. So I think it'll be a while till they enter America. So there you go.
Mean, you're not wrong, but I would have the same thought for any company in this regard that has a lot of my PII of, okay, what is your plan to change this going forward so that this is not a problem again?
All right. Well, I will continue to follow this breaking, developing news, and I will let you know, Chris, in the future when I hear so that you can confidently get your prescription from London Drugs.
When are we getting our channel on Discord for this coverage?
No, we're running out of space. No.
There's plenty of space. Yeah, I'm not going to put another channel in there. So for a couple of things. First of all, is this a classic example of London Drugs falling down?
Yes, I think it is.
Okay.
Well done. Well done. That's a me joke. I'm impressed.
and then I think this was all planned. I think they just closed their store for a couple of days. I think this whole cyber attack was just an excuse. I think they wanted to close and then have a grand reopening on Star Wars Day. I think that's what they wanted to do.
They're not open that.
Yeah, a grand reopening.
So Star Wars Day is a year away.
No, they started. They got what? What did I say? Like 20 stores? Isn't that what I said?
28.
There you go.
That's a failing grade.
I wonder, and Steve and I mentioned this to you, I wonder if there is some sort of insurance that companies can get now for cyber hacking events that then pays the company so you don't have to immediately return to work. So it pays the employees, it will pay for the lost generation of income, and will help pay for the reconstitution of the digital services. I wonder if there is. I have no idea if there is or isn't. I have no idea if London Drugs has this insurance or not, but their slow reopening might be indicative of something like that. And if not, they're just hurting their bottom line.
Or maybe if they do, there is something in the policy about having to wait until May the 4th. It all comes together.
Or Revenge of the 5th.
Well, I look forward to us discussing the next cybersecurity incident that's bound to be right around the corner.
It's probably happening as we speak.
All right. Tell us a little bit about the 4th flight. Look at this theme we've got going on here.
Yes. So I've been covering Starship development. We talked a little bit about the 3rd flight test last time and what SpaceX was doing For the fourth test flight, which is coming up, it could happen as early as next week. I think it's going to be a couple of weeks after that, judging by the pace of activity this week. But let's go over what's happened and what we can look forward to. SpaceX is continuing to march towards the fourth flight of its Starship in the developmental stages while testing new hardware and planning for future flights. Multiple things are happening all at the same time. Booster 11 and Booster 29, which are the hardware identified for the fourth flight test, have completed their static fire engine campaigns, and SpaceX has moved on to start testing the next hardware, Ship 30 and Booster 13, as well as they continue to modify Ship 29 with its heat shield replacements or the new glue to go with the heat shields.
Quick question for you.
Yes.
Booster 13, was it also stored in Warehouse 13?
I can neither confirm nor deny that.
Okay. Well, maybe you can find out for us.
I'll check into it. Yeah. So the future flight hardware testing goes as follows. On May 1st, Ship 30 was rolled out to the launch site for testing. As far as I know, it hasn't actually undergone any testing. Booster 12 had already underwent cryogenic testing at the Massey's test site back in January. Now, Booster 13 underwent cryogenic testing at the Massey's site on 26, 27, and 29 April before being rolled back to the production site on May 3rd. I'm guessing you guys might be scratching your heads a little bit as to me saying anything about Massey's. So do you guys know what Massey's is?
Negative.
I thought you were saying the word mass, but with like East Coast accent.
Well, it's spelled Masseys. And what it used to be is a no kidding firing range that was just down the road from the launch and production site. So it's farther inland and it is right on the Rio Grande. So the site backs up to Mexico, but the Rio Grande is right there in between Massey's site and Mexico. And what they're doing there is they're doing all of their before launch tests. They're creating an entire system out there that they could test their rockets out there and not encumber the actual launch sites. And this is very important. If something goes wrong, you don't want something exploding on the launch pad and then ruining your ability to launch other hardware. So they've been driving towards this. The rockets are already tested at the rocket engines themselves are already tested at a different location, but they needed something to actually test the rockets, do cryogenic testing and static fire testing. So they're duplicating a lot of the launch infrastructure, the tanks, and the ability to divert flames and cool the area. They are duplicating that with specialized stands, not the same stands that they have at the launch site, but specialized stands at Massey's. So when you hear of one of the ships or the boosters being tested at Massey's, it's actually being trucked all the way over there from the production site and it's tested. And then once it's completed, they roll it all the way back to the production site for storage until it's actually used in the launch. So talking about the launch site, it continues its modifications. The first notable thing is they put a new actuator on one of the chopstick arms, the left arm, and you can tell they've tested it and it goes a lot faster. Does it go fast enough to catch booster? I don't know yet. It's got to go pretty fast or the booster has to stay static for a little bit while the arms come in, but it's going a lot faster. So they put a new actuator in. As it goes and closes, it wobbles a little bit. And so they're going to have to put some sort of dampener on that. But for now, it's an improvement enough to try to catch a booster. They've also continued with the tank farm improvements. They're getting rid of those big, huge standing tanks that you can't really protect against a launch. You're going to get a lot of overpressure. You're going to get a lot of debris that impacts them. So they decided to move away from those and go to more horizontal tanks next to the launch site itself. So they're doing that. Also, the quick disconnect arm, the improvements are ongoing there. They put a hood back on. They took the top of the hood off, but then they put a new line in there. So they are making those improvements, which are important. If you're going to have some downtime, you might as well take advantage of it. And then here's the biggest news. They are proceeding with launch site 2 tower, the second tower for the launch site. The construction is progressing. They have to level the land, so there's a lot of dirt moving going on. And that site, by the way, was the location of the employee parking that went out to the launch site. So they have to make a new parking site right outside. So they actually had, their big Starbase wall that they had out there, the gateway to Mars. They actually had to cut a hole in it so that the people could use the new parking lot, which hasn't been paved yet, so they could go into the launch site itself. So at the main production site, it's also getting massive upgrades to include a new production hangar, a new office building with a great view of the launch site, and a 6-story parking garage. So they are making a lot of investments to this site. It's actually pretty cool. Now, the future test planning includes more detail on the on-orbit fuel transfer, the demonstration set for next year. But before I move on to that, guys, I want to know, do you have any questions about either the testing of the hardware or the launch site modifications?
I'd like to know if they are in the new staff parking lot going to have regular food trucks.
I'm sure they do, actually. There's no other... Right now, I don't think there's a restaurant or a cafe. No, they do have a cafeteria, but it's not big enough to serve everybody. So they probably do have food trucks going on. I'll have to ask.
What's the hierarchy for office spaces facing the launch site, I wonder?
I don't know if that is a benefit or a detriment, because if you're actually trying to do work, you don't want people coming to your desk every time there's a launch.
I'd also like to know if they're going to serve the space ice cream bars, the astronaut bars.
Ooh, astronaut ice cream.
I have no idea what SpaceX actually has for astronaut food, but yeah, I'll look into that too. There's got to be menus on their Dragon.
I appreciate you handling these hard-hitting questions that Chris and I are throwing your way.
There's no softballs coming from Steven and I tonight.
I don't think there's any softballs on Starship itself or Dragon.
Do they have a company softball team by chance, and will they be at the launch event?
Actually, I think they probably have several teams, depending on what department that you work in out there. And not to mention, SpaceX is not just at Boca Chica. It's also at Hawthorne in California. It's at the Cape. They have multiple sites. In the rocket test stand that I talked about, they have lots of sites that you can go. I bet you they all have teams, and I bet you they come together each year and have a tournament.
Last question. Is employee parking complimentary, or do they have to pay?
I'm pretty sure it's pay to play, especially since each individual parking spot has a supercharger on it.
All right. Well, we will wait for you to confirm that, because I think is not an answer.
I think therefore
You have
I can.
homework.
All right. So before I get to the homework, let's finish this off. Let's talk about the future flight test planning. They let loose with a briefing that they gave NASA on what's happening, because this is part of the Artemis program as well as their own individual rocket capability. They're doing the human landing system. They won that contract. And in order to get the human landing system on the moon, what they're going to have to do is refuel it. And in order to refuel it, they're going to have to do on-orbit prop transfer. So this is the fuel that they're transferring back and forth. There was that demo that they did during Flight Test 3. We still don't have the results from that, but they have to do it in mass scale now with 2 starships that actually come together. One's a tanker, and then one is the actual landing system or starship or something like that, right? So
have they hired the Spice Girls to use their music to become one? It feels like a very fitting song for it.
Elon is eating this up because, well, yeah, it looks like, it looks like what you think it is. Yep, two big systems coming together. It's obscene. That's what he says. So the plan is that both starships will launch from Starbase for this test. The tanker will be called Chaser, and the other starship will be called Target. Target will launch first and will have the active part of the docking mechanism. Chaser will have the active relative navigation sensors. The propellant transfer demo flight system review has been completed. That's interesting. I didn't know it had gone that far. The Starship will use the hot gas thrusters again for this trip, and the ship-to-ship propellant transfer demo is planned to happen in 2025. So they are on a schedule, and they need to get some launches going. As I talked about last time, they're planning on 8 launches for the remainder of 2024, and we've only had 1 so far. So 7 for the rest of the year. We've got 7 months, so that's like 1 a month that are coming up.
That's nuts. I just wish that we were doing this podcast 1 a month from now till the end of the year.
Yep. We'll be covering this. And more importantly, Artemis is planned to launch at the end of next year, but we'll get to that in a little bit.
Well, thank you for informing us all about that and for putting up with our BS the entire time. We're a tough crowd tonight, and my apologies to you.
How is this different than any other night, Stephen?
That's valid. Very valid.
Yeah, fair point.
All right, moving on to the next news point here. 2FA Google change. What's happening over there?
That's right. I'm here to talk to you about cybersecurity after Steven talked about cybersecurity. I'm sure you guys are going to love it. But in all seriousness, we're going to talk about Google's two-factor authentication. So let me caveat and start saying this. If you haven't turned on two-factor authentication on your Google account, pause the podcast right now. Or I guess pause it after we do the story because it might be important to that. And go enable two-factor authentication because it's the best way to secure your account. And especially if you're someone who lives in the Android ecosystem, everything is linked to your Google account. And having that get compromised would be really problematic.
I can't. There's no pause button here, Chris.
Well, it won't work for people that are actually on the show to pause, but for folks that are watching live or watching / listening later, feel free to pause after I finish the story to then go and follow the advice of enabling two-factor authentication.
But I have a question. Okay, so
yes.
How do I know that you are actually Chris? I need a 2FA for you before you join this show.
Do you want me to text you something in our private chat right now?
No.
Always. Always.
All right, I'm on it. All right. No, in all seriousness, though, Google has heard some of the concerns that folks have had regarding two-factor authentication because up until now, it required first entering your phone number to enable two-factor authentication, which is problematic because we know that people can intercept and spam SMS messages and the like. They have now set it up so you can add a second step method to your account, such as using an authenticator app or a hardware security key to get things set up. No longer do you have to use the less secure SMS verification. And once that's all in place, I don't fully understand what passkeys are yet, but you can then go about using passkeys to further lock down any of your other accounts and things like that. I do know they've seen a lot of people use passkeys with the new service, but I haven't educated myself a ton on it. But I thought it was worth bringing up on the show that to set up two-factor authentication for your Google account now, you don't have to use SMS. You can use an authenticator app. And that doesn't necessarily mean you have to use the Google Authenticator. You could use the Microsoft one or Authy or something like that. And in fact, you're probably better off not using the Google one if you're using an authenticator app because that's tied with the account that could, in theory, get compromised.
I didn't realize actually that you had to use SMS to begin with. Was it so?
Yep.
That was the first step that was required?
Yes.
Oh.
When I set up my two-factor authentication originally, and this was years ago, it was that you had to use SMS to start things. I don't recall if you could then kind of push it out in favor of using something like an authenticator app or not. But the new process now does not require SMS, which I think is a big deal.
I know that there must have been a way to at least very minimize it because I've run into that before. I use a hardware key and a YubiKey. And what I have found a couple of times that I've been lazy is I've tried to prompt an alternative method. Like my keys will be downstairs and I'm like, oh, I don't want to go downstairs. Can I prompt an alternative method? And sometimes it will allow me to do it on my phone, but a lot of times it'll say, no, you got to go get the key. So, or a recovery code. So, this is why I didn't realize that because I must have done that a long time ago and shut that part off.
Yeah, I think I was one of the early adopters of activating two-factor authentication on my account, mostly just because I hear the horror stories all the time. I have to take yearly cybersecurity training about how to properly secure things and the consequences of not doing so. And I was like, nope, 2-factor. As soon as it's available, turn it on. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we've had this discussion before. I do like 2-factor authentication. I really do. But my problem stems, for those that don't remember, the fact that I can't have my phone at work. So if I'm trying to reach a personal site, and I'm trying to get in, I can't have 2-factor authentication because I don't have my phone. I'd have to run out to my phone, which is in my car. It's like a half mile away, and I'm not kidding. My car is a half mile away from my desk. I've got to run out there. I've got to then authenticate it and then run back in before it all times out. The option, as we talked about before, is having some of these one-time use codes and have those written down, and I can use those when I take it in. But I don't like using those either because it's a pain in the butt. So I try to use alternative methods as much as I can, just because I don't have my phone with me at work. That's not to say I don't have 2-factor authentication on my accounts. I do. It's just a pain in the rear end when I can't get to those apps. I can't get to Authy because it's on my phone. I can't get to Google Authenticator because it's on my phone. So I'm screwed unless I have those codes or an alternative method.
Luckily for me, my work won't let me do anything personal, or I get in trouble. So, yay, that makes my job easier.
Go team.
Yeah, because of our unique setup, they do allow us to do some personal things to communicate back and forth or do personal business. Otherwise, we would literally have to take hours out of our week by going back and forth to our car, or, taking time off to go home early or that sort of thing. So they do allow us to do that. And we can't go to any like adult sites or anything like that. It's literally like social media. It's like accounts, some financial accounts, some, that sort of thing. I can get to password accounts at work, which I don't use that for work passwords, but I have for personal stuff. So yeah, I'm in between a rock and a hard place. So when you bring me news like this, Chris, I agree with it. I just am frustrated that I can't follow it.
That's fair.
Well, I'm just glad that you use an iPhone, because my understanding is that the iPhone is so good at knowing everything you do. It just predicts what you want to log into without you even having to worry about entering your password. Is that right?
It has passkeys.
No. It just knows. It's like, SP's going to go to this site. I know that that's going to happen. It's actually him. I will authenticate it right now, and you don't even have to open up the browser. It just does it for you.
No, that's the special hacked AI software that I have installed in there. Has nothing to do with Apple.
Oh, okay. Well, moving on, let's talk about the Arc browser, because for those of you who didn't know about this, Arc browser is a browser that has been making the rounds over the last couple of years. Arc browser is a web browser originally designed for macOS and iOS, and now there's a Windows version. Arc is a free browser developed by, quote, the browser company, end quote, which was created by Josh Miller and Hirsch Agrawal. Agrawal. And that was created on April 19th, 2022, after having been done a closed beta. And before this Windows release, which is the news point now, it was exclusively on Mac and iOS. And apparently this new build on Windows is because Arc is using what is called Swift programming language, not C++ like you see in Chrome and Edge. From a fundamental perspective, though, it is still an offshoot of Chromium. So that means you can get extensions that you love in Edge or Chrome. They are possible in there, but the way that apparently this Arc browser works is it's trying to create like almost a profile system within browsers. Yes, go ahead.
Does this mean the Swifties are all using this?
Yeah, I think that's what the Swift programming language is. I think it was actually developed by Taylor Swift.
She's smart.
Yes, I think that's what this is. And so if you are a Taylor Swift fan, a Swiftie, you can use Arc because it's trying to create like a almost like an operating system within the browser, meaning you have different profiles for different functions. You might have a section dedicated to work tabs or a section dedicated to productivity, maybe for podcasting. And it's just a different way of organizing your browser. And then there's also different features in there or different visuals in there, I'll say, because they like to have a left sidebar as opposed to a top sidebar. And they also, of course, do say that they have a focus on privacy. Now, here's the thing. If this sounds like this is a pretty new thing, it's because it is. Like I said, it's only 2 years old. And I think the best way that I can frame this is they only recently created sync between macOS and iOS. So that's a thing that just recently happened. And there's no Android version, even though they say that there might be coming. And then, of course, this just came to Windows. So it still is very new. I will say that I gave it a quick install after coming across this because I had heard about Arc. And I thought, well, okay, I'm going to talk about it coming to Windows. Let me take a look. I can see why the layout would be appealing. I had started by creating a section that was for personal and then a section for podcast tabs. And I could see how that would be useful. But I think I'll hold off on that because I think it would be really silly since I'm evaluating the whole Mac thing right now. I think it would be really silly for me to add another layer. Like, let's say I had Arc going at the same time that I was running Edge, and all of a sudden my Mac crashed while I was streaming. I wouldn't know. Is it Arc related, or is it just my Mac isn't sufficient enough? So I think any Arc testing I'll hold off until I have firmly decided whether I'm keeping this Mac or elsewise, and I will wait and do other testing later. But it would just be a testing perspective because for me, I really like the sync feature between a mobile platform and a desktop platform. Last year, when I had first tried Edge, I ran into a problem where I couldn't get the sync working properly, and so I went back to Chrome. I'm back on Edge now, and the sync's working fine. But that is something that without having an Android version, I couldn't do it because I really like having mobile sync to desktop. Have either of you heard about Arc or seen anything about it?
So I did a few years back when it first came out because I think it was one of the tech folks I follow on YouTube was talking about it when it very first came out. And I think this is when it was in beta. And I was like, okay, I want to read a little bit more about this. And I think I'd signed up to get into the beta and never really did. And then when it went live, I got an email and I went, oh, I should try that. And then promptly forgot to ever try it. So I have a passing familiarity and I dug into it a little bit when it was in beta, but I haven't tried it yet. I'm kind of tempted to, but it seems that without a Android version of it, I'm not really getting that mobile sync. So, yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing is, when I first tried it here, I did find there seems like a bit of a learning curve to it, just because the way it's organized, the idea being that you have different profiles, trying to pop things out is a little bit different because it's really trying to keep you in one specific session. You can have multiple ones, but when you pop things out, it's kind of like popping it out in a mini window of it. And so I think the learning curve would be a little steep to begin with. But I'm going to uninstall it just because I don't want to add more question marks to my evaluation. But there is a lot that I originally, in my quick test, thought, this is interesting. I'm surprised, though, that SPU didn't do this since, up until a handful of months ago, however many months you can get in a handful, you were the Apple user of this podcast.
Well, I have an iPad and I have an iPhone. I have a 10-year-old iMac Pro, which is pretty much useless. So no, I don't really use a browser on a computer with the Apple architecture. But if I did, I'd be looking into it. I'd been thinking about starting to look around for different browsers. I've been using Chrome for quite some time and it is bloated. I understand that. I come back to it every time I try something else. It's like it's not like going home. It's like the prison that you're sucked back into, basically. So yeah, there's that. But I'm looking forward to more browsers. At work, I use both Chrome and Edge. I use Edge a little bit at home, but for the most part, it's Chrome.
If you are using Arc, listener or viewer, we would love to know what your thoughts are on it. Why don't you take us home, SP, with our last news point of the night, or day, or morning, whenever you're watching or listening to this.
So we talked a little bit about the Starship, the fourth flight test. Also, the other component to the Artemis program is the SLS, or Space Launch System, and the Orion space capsule. Artemis 2 is gone through its readiness review, and it has a report. The report just came out on May 1st, 2024. In that report, it dictated several things. We already knew about some of it. First of all was the heat shield issues. There were over 100 spots on the heat shield that had ablated a little bit too much and caused NASA officials to go, yeah, especially when you're dealing with crew safety, and we've already lost like Columbia to reentry issues. So heat shields seem to be very important to NASA for crew safety. So they wanted to reevaluate that. Also, the service module jettison bolts, the remaining bolts that were on the bottom of the Orion had ablated way too much. So they're also concerned about that. They are considering making some changes to the design, looking at an updated reentry profile, and they have an estimated completion date of 30 June for all of these reentry issues, the heat shield, the bolts, the profile, that sort of thing. Also in the readiness report was the 24 different electrical system, basically shutdowns and restarts. They claim it's due to basically 24 breaker resets that were caused by radiation. That makes me feel really comfortable, by the way. You get beyond the Earth's low Earth orbit and the Van Allen radiation belts that protect you from radiation. You're going to the moon, and the space system electronics aren't hardened enough to fly in that environment. Yeah. So they're going to be looking into that. Also, the parachutes worked fine, but once they landed, they couldn't recover them. And they always want to recover them to look at how they did, how they might have been stressed a little bit too much, that sort of thing. So they're looking into changing the way they do things so that they can recover the parachutes better. The ones that they had before were just lost. Also, the solid rocket boosters on Artemis are the same solid rocket boosters that were used on the space shuttle. Once you start stacking them, these are known quantities, by the way. Once you start stacking them, they are certified for 12 months. Now, it's always via a measurement, and these measurements have to deal with the stability of the solid rocket fuel themselves. So you can extend that if you have good measurements to 24 months, which is what they basically did with Artemis 1. And they don't want to do that. They want to stay within 12 months. So their recommendation in the readiness report was not to start stacking until later, because if you look and you have other issues with other systems, those boosters will be assembled and the time will be ticking on their usefulness. So their recommendation was don't start stacking them until you absolutely need to. So those are the issues from the Artemis 2 readiness report. NASA's got some decisions to make for that. Right now, the mission is slated for September 2025. We'll see if that date holds. Another thing that they're running into is a resource issue. And by resource, I mean money. And they've basically had to put the Mars sample return on life support. There was a resourcing decision out there, and an RFI was issued on the 22nd of April, and they're looking at industry to give them some sort of a design on a mission that can be affordable to return those samples that the Curiosity rover has actually taken on the planet's surface. Right now, NASA funding would allow the return sample mission to occur in 2040. And guys, do you happen to know when we're going to land humans on Mars?
We already did. That's a trap.
Okay. Do you happen to know when NASA's gonna land humans on Mars? It's supposedly before 2040. So they're scratching their heads over why they would put money into this when they should be putting money into things like Starship and Artemis and SLS in order to get to Mars before this date of 2040. So it's almost a waste, that part of the mission right now. But back when the mission was initially created, with sending the rover out there with the technology to take these samples, the concept of having humans on Mars was more of a dream than an actuality. And I'll still say it's a dream, but we're making the hardware right now to actually do it. So it's more of a possibility now than it used to be. So I'm not going to fault anybody at NASA necessarily for this, but we've all wanted to see this mission happen, and I just don't think we're going to get there. I think what we're going to see instead are humans landing on Mars. But these proposals by these companies are due back to NASA by May 17th, 2024, to see if they can do something that's faster and cheaper. I don't know if anything's going to be possible on that. So we'll just see. NASA's having to make some hard decisions with their deep space exploration, in particular the Mars sample return and the Artemis 2.
All right, I got 2 points. Number one, I can't believe I'm going to solve this problem with a return sample, okay? Correct me if I
can't believe it either.
I am wrong, but Mars has, gravity, correct?
It does. It's weaker, but it has gravity.
And just like with the Earth, things that are in orbit will eventually come down into Mars's gravity, right?
Eventually, it's going to take a while, but yeah.
Yeah. Also, when you move something in space, it just keeps going, mostly, right?
Mostly.
Yes, effectively.
So why don't we go down to Home Depot, get a big, long roll of rope.
Toilet paper?
I was going to say rope. Toilet paper might work, but rope probably be better.
Natural or artificial fibers?
Either will work for this. And we'll slap a magnet on it. We'll just send it towards Mars. Eventually it'll come down. Boom. Attaches to the sample. And then we just start pulling. Why don't we do that?
That'd be a pretty cool space elevator trick. I'd be for trying that.
All right. There you go. NASA, you can have that idea and just call it the Stephen John Drew array or something.
You know how the people that are salvaging stuff in the water, they do that magnet fishing?
Yeah.
This sounds a lot like magnet fishing, except on a planet.
100% original Stephen idea. Patented.
Well, it's original 100%. Because you're doing it in space.
Second thing, you said there was something about a premature rocket stacking.
Oh, no.
Sorry, premature rocket booster stacking.
I did.
And
I was hoping you'd bring this up.
First off, premature rocket. Secondly, you said 12-month certification, not 24 months. Do they sell an extended warranty to bring it up to 24 months?
That's not what I was expecting, but I'm entertained.
Yes, it's called bribes to the inspectors.
Okay, perfect. That's all I got.
At the same time, I would not want to fly a solid rocket when it's beyond its certification because Challenger.
Mm-hmm.
Fair.
Extended warranty, though. I thought that means that everything's taken care of.
It just means that you have to destack it, put new O-rings on it, and restack it.
Okay.
It's not you can fly it. We have to bring it back to the shop and repair it.
My understanding of life insurance might be wrong. I thought it meant that I could do anything and I got a free life out of it.
That depends on if you're playing Fallout or not. With stim packs.
Fair.
Well, thank you everybody for coming by another edition of the GonnaGeek Show. We do greatly appreciate it. If you are somebody who watches or listens to the show, we would love it if you'd come to our Discord server at GonnaGeek.com/Discord. We'd love to have you over there and chat with us. There's a lot of awesome geeky content that happens over there, a lot of geeky talk, and you might even see SP drinking out of a Boeing mug. That sometimes happens too.
Yes.
Scandalous.
Boeing. Yeah.
Hey, look, it looks like it's breaking.
You think? Yeah, so Boeing, but for those that don't know, the joke tonight is that Boeing they're the creator of the Starliner, and they've not had a program not fail in like 10 years or something like that. So Everything's failed. The the Starliner thing, yeah, we've talked about it before, how everybody expected Starliner to work and SpaceX's Dragon to not work. It has been the complete opposite, and this is Boeing's chance to actually use its space capsule to put people on the International Space Station. We'll see if it works. It's going to launch in less than 2 hours at this point.
Looking forward to it. And if you want to talk more space stuff, I heard that you can go on to your favorite social media site, go to @StargatePioneer and tell him he should start a space podcast, because he's been telling Chris to start a wrestling podcast. And I think we should tell SP to start a space podcast.
I wouldn't mind that, especially if I move down to Florida like I want to do now. So we'll see.
You're going to get bit by a gator, aren't you? SP's going to be out there for launch, not paying attention. There's going to be a gator that comes up and grabs him.
Yeah, I could see that happening, especially if it's a night launch and I'm not paying attention.
You're going to be gator bait.
Well, that's going to go ahead and wrap it up. So, for another episode of the official GonnaGeek Show, I'm Steven saying make sure that you pay attention to GonnaGeekNetwork.com, because I heard that soon there will be a Chris and SP space wrestling podcast.
Ooh.
Interesting.
Yeah, we'll see everybody next month, and hopefully we'll have some launches to report on. I'm looking forward to that. So see everybody next time. Bye.
I'm Chris, and I'm not gator bait.
Yet.
Fair point.
Bye.
Thanks for checking out another episode of the official GonnaGeek.com show. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star review in Apple Podcasts or a thumbs up on YouTube. You can always join us for our live recording sessions at www.geeks.live. And remember, you can find our full back catalog at GonnaGeek.com/show. If you're itching for more geeky content, check out other shows on GonnaGeekNetwork.com. Voice work was by Emily Prokop of the Story Behind podcast. That's it for this episode. We hope to see you back again next show.